We are ready to get started.
Thank you, Allison. Well, good afternoon and welcome to our second monthly office hours in our series. Each month, we will review a domain related to policy development and implementation, provide you with a tip sheet for putting policies into action, and provide a forum for questions and answers, as well as just-in-time technical assistance. Today, we will be reviewing strategy and policy development. Before we get started, I wanted to briefly review our platform. Everyone is currently muted and in listen-only mode. We will save Q&A for the end of the session. If you have a question, please use either the Q&A or chat icon at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to enter your questions throughout the session, and they will be answered at the end. The resources from today's session will be provided in chat. We want today's session to be interactive, and we welcome you to use the chat to share your experiences and be engaged in our session. When using chat, please be sure to select the option to send to all panelists and attendees. Today's session is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording within 24 hours. We will disable recording at the conclusion of our presentation and before we invite participants to ask questions. If you encounter audio challenges, click Audio Settings in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen to adjust your settings, or you can also listen by phone. The telephone number was provided in your confirmation email. Again, good afternoon, and thank you for joining our monthly office hours. I'm Felicity Wood, a consultant with Health Quality Innovators, and my colleague Allison Spangler, Project Manager, is joining me on this webinar. We have partnered with Leading Age Virginia on this initiative. Our Leading Age partner, Betsy Archer, was unable to attend today, but she is also available should you need any additional support. This project is funded by the CDC through the Virginia Department of Health. Our goal is to provide model infection prevention and control policies for consistency among all licensed adult day centers in Virginia. This will in turn provide you with the tools and processes to best control and prevent infections, to quickly navigate and respond to disease and infectious threats. It is also our goal to assist you in adopting and implementing these policies at your individual centers. We are accomplishing the goals of this grant project by working with a work group comprised of leaders and stakeholders from adult day centers throughout the state of Virginia. These individuals are developing and editing the model policy templates for this project, which will be shared with you for use in your adult day center. Some of the work group members are on this webinar today, and we thank them for their continued effort and great work on this project. To date, the work group has authored and distributed 5 policy templates for the topics listed on this slide. This slide links each of the policy templates for ease and access and use for you. These policies are not a one-size-fits-all, but rather are designed to be customized to meet the needs of your center. For example, you may already have a policy in process for monitoring blood glucose, but our suggestion is that you download the template and compare it to your current policy and practice. The policy template may suggest a new or slightly different practice that is reflective of best practices, or it may elevate your current practices to further prevent infections. We encourage you to work towards adopting the recommended or best practices where applicable, keeping in mind that any practice described in your policy becomes the standard by which you are evaluated during an on-site survey. If your center is not ready to fully implement all practices in the model template, please be sure to conduct a policy analysis or readiness assessment to identify practices you're ready to implement and be held accountable to, versus those practices that you will work towards implementing in future months, but exclude them from your current policy. Remember that once a policy describes a practice, your center is responsible for performing that practice and can be cited during survey if it is not following the described practice. So I want to provide a quick recap of the office hours in May where we reviewed policy analysis. A policy analysis is identifying and comparing possible policy options that could address a problem. The analysis part of the policy process is important as it allows you to select the policies that will be most effective, efficient, and feasible for your center. Without a proper policy analysis, a policy you implement may make it difficult for staff to comply with and sustain the policy. How you complete a policy analysis includes conducting a review of all of your existing policies, put together a team comprised of your staff and even participants and family members, and have them help you prioritize what policies you already have that maybe just need to be reviewed and updated, and also determine what policies you don't have that will need to be developed. Once you have completed your policy analysis, you move into the strategy and policy development part of the policy process, and that is what we will be discussing today. To get us focused on today's office hours topic of strategy and policy development, we have a quick polling question to get an idea of your current policy review process. What prompts you to review your existing policies? Is it 1, survey citations? 2, the regulations and standards have changed? 3, model policy templates are now available? Or 4, we review at least annually? Answers coming in, and it looks like a good mix between regulations and standards have changed, as well as reviewing at least annually.
And we'll give everyone just a few more seconds to get their responses in. Okay. And I will end the poll and share the results.
Great, thank you, Allison. Well, no one updates policies based upon survey citations, but it looks like it's a pretty good mix between regulations and standards have changed and reviewed at least annually. So thank you for your responses. These are all valid reasons to initiate the next step in the policy process. So let's segue into how to continue to strategize and develop policies to be sure you have a process in place to revise your policies on a routine and as needed basis. Strategy and policy development is the process of planning how to develop, draft, and prepare for policy implementation. Completing this process will help you make the policy you developed actionable. What does that mean and why is it important? Well, not every policy template fits every adult day center perfectly. You can't just rubber stamp a template and expect the policy to work exactly as written unless you have strategized and further developed a template into a policy that fits your center. There are many things to consider when going through the policy development process. What language are you going to use for your policies? The language has to be just right, not too technical, but it must still remain professional. The length of a policy has to be brief, or you risk the reader becoming potentially overwhelmed by the volume of information presented, and they might start glossing over the important points. Yet the policy must be informative, and most of all, it needs to speak to your targeted audience. The template policies created throughout this grant-funded project are here for you to either put into place as they are written or to further refine and make them perfect for your center. These policy templates are evidence-based, robust, and will achieve the desired results in various scenarios. Just a reminder that the policy templates provided through this grant project have been reviewed by a team of infection preventionists. Many of these infection preventionists are conducting on-site visits at adult day centers and are seeing day-to-day operations. During the policy reviews they have conducted, the infection preventionists are mindful of their observations of your daily work and how a policy may impact you and, most importantly, benefit the center and your participants served. After our May office hours, several participants commented that they already have policies in place, and they asked, what do they do? If this applies to your center, we encourage you to scrutinize if your current policies are reflective of current processes and standards. Have any changes been made to either regulatory guidance or your daily operations? If so, make sure your policies are updated on at least an annual as well as an as-needed basis. Perhaps you don't need to adopt an entire policy template from this project, but maybe there are some updates and items that you do want to use to update the policies you already have in place. You know the importance of strategy and policy development, and now you want to know how to do that at your Adult Day Center. Well, first you need to identify why you need or want to create a policy. You know that you can't and shouldn't create policies and processes for every unforeseen event or hypothetical situation. After all, that would just limit your ability to address unique situations and specific individual needs when they occur. Instead, the policies you create should address an identifiable need in your center. Does the behavior of your staff indicate confusion about appropriate infection control practices in certain situations, like proper process for blood glucose monitoring? Do you need to create consistent standards and rules to ensure safe and consistent infection control practices? Once you've identified the need the policy is meant to address, it will be easier to pin down your goals as to what the policy will accomplish and start collecting necessary data to achieve this. Second, you need to outline your policy content. Every policy, like every center, is different and will require different things from written policies and processes. As you learn how to develop policies and procedures, you'll find most policies will have similar components. Next, be sure to get input from stakeholders, as communication is key. Before you change or add policies, you need to get input from at least a sample of those in your center that these changes will affect. This includes members of leadership and staff who understand the policy and will be impacted by it. When getting input for new policies and processes, and depending upon the size of your center, gather a couple of team members to form a committee to assist you in this effort. Your policy committee doesn't have to be big. This will further ensure that all affected staff members are given a voice. Policy committees also help to maintain communication, efficiency, and focus. Once you've identified what needs to go in your policy, it's time to develop and write your policy. Policies and procedures should be written in clear, concise language. However, they should also have flexibility built into their wording and structure to ensure ease of application when different situations arise. Terms like generally, typically, usually, those terms all give leadership more room to interpret and apply policies. Once you have the policy draft written, seeking out feedback within your center is the next step. We'll make sure your new policy is comprehensive and viable. This is the time to implement a policy review process. A good and thorough policy review process should focus on making sure that each of the procedural steps is going to work at your center. And if they won't, make a change. Once the draft is shared to obtain feedback, give staff some time to process the draft and come back to the committee at a later established time to ask questions and assist with further development of the policy. A draft policy should even be put into action on a trial basis. Consider giving some of your staff an opportunity to put the draft into action to truly determine if the steps are going to work. No organization is static, and its policy shouldn't be either. Well-written policies that are regularly reviewed and updated are an important source of communication within a center and show that you're dedicated to meeting the evolving needs of those the center both serves and employs. Regular reviews and updates also help ensure that policies remain compliant with changing federal and state laws, regulations, and standards. On this slide, we've provided a checklist for use in policy development at your adult day center. The goal of this checklist is to outline the process that can be used to develop or review the content of any new policy. Use this checklist for both new policy development, as well as annual and as-needed policy development and revisions. The checklist shown here is available on the tip sheet we discussed on a previous slide. Utilizing the criteria in this checklist, answer yes or no to each element to determine the rationale and reasoning for the policy topics you are considering. This checklist will also help you to determine if the current policies you have are practical, if they're written in easy to understand format, and they include the staff responsible for carrying out the procedural steps of the policy, or if your current policy needs to be updated. Shortly, I will be sharing 2 new policy templates that have been developed by the project work group. You can use this checklist to see if the policy templates shared today will be a good fit for your adult day center. I'd like to now share a case study with you about an adult day center with a 3-year license and no violations on their most recent inspection. This center recently had an on-site infection prevention and control assessment that resulted in feedback in the areas of auditing and environmental cleaning. Related to auditing, the center does not have a process to validate staff compliance with policies. In the area of environmental cleaning, while the center does have a policy, it was observed that they do not, however, have a process for the separation of clean and dirty spaces. Therefore, when equipment is cleaned, it can come into contact with and potentially be stored in the same areas as equipment that has not yet been cleaned. So what should the center do with these recommendations? Well, they should implement a strategy and policy development session with their team. They should review the policies they currently have in place with those needed as recommended by the feedback from their on-site inspection. Since this center has an environmental cleaning policy currently, they should update and revise their current policy with best practices from the policy template that will soon be provided through this grant project. The center's revised policy should not only include cleaning protocols and product usage, but should also include information about clean and dirty spaces and how to accomplish that in whatever size space they have in their center. Since the center does not have an auditing policy, they should review the policy template on auditing, monitoring, and compliance that will soon be provided through this grant project and determine what parts of the template project policy will work for their center and what parts need to be modified. They should develop their own center-specific policy, either using part of the template policy as a resource or adopt the entire template. As mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, we've been working with a group comprised of leaders and stakeholders from adult day centers throughout the state of Virginia. This group of individuals are developing and editing the model policy templates for this project. We have 2 new finalized policy templates to share with you today. In subsequent office hours, we will share additional policy templates as they too become finalized. All policy templates developed through this project meet standards and regulations set forth by VDSS. All policy templates have been reviewed by a team of infection preventionists for content and accuracy, and have also been reviewed by VDSS to ensure the templates do not conflict with or make it more difficult to comply with adult day center regulations. In this injection safety policy template, you will find guidance on proper preparation of medications in a clean and designated area, which should ensure the privacy and dignity of your participants. As these policy templates focus on infection prevention and control, there is much focus in this template on evidence-based practices to reduce the risk of transmitting infectious diseases and also to ensure the safety of the participant receiving the medication. and the staff administering the injection. There are also procedures on proper response if an unsafe injection practice occurs. The second policy template to share is blood glucose monitoring. The proper procedure for conducting blood glucose monitoring on your participants is especially important for their safety, as well as the safety of the staff member who is conducting the monitoring. Not following the proper procedure could result in exposure to bacteria and germs, which could potentially infect your participant. If your center already has a policy in place, check to be sure that your policy provides the steps for proper blood glucose monitoring and the resulting insulin administration. If it does not, reference this policy template and revise your current policy. If you do not have a policy at all, review this template for possible adoption at your center. The blood glucose policy template also provides best practices or points for you to consider when developing your own policy, which will further reinforce the importance of proper monitoring and administration for your center staff. This policy also recommends auditing and monitoring your staff for adherence and compliance to the correct procedure. Are you ready to get started with policy development at your center? And you're asking, where do you start? If you didn't already complete a policy analysis, start there as part of your strategy and review your existing policies. Prioritize what policies you already have that need to be reviewed and updated, and what policies you don't have that need to be developed. Now gather your team together and get started and determine what policies and/or procedural steps have and have not worked in the past. Your policy must be actionable, as without this, staff are not going to adhere to the policy. If the policy is not written in a language that is easily understood, is too lengthy, or doesn't clearly outline the steps for proper compliance, staff are going to end up confused, frustrated, and they're not going to follow the policy. And then participate in next month's office hours to learn the next steps in the policy process, which is policy enactment. As we conclude today's office hours, we would love your feedback through another polling question. Based on the information shared during today's webinar, what is your next step at your Adult Day Center? Will you be identifying the policies needed at your center? Will you update and review center policies based upon the policy templates received from this project? Will you educate and re-educate staff on policies or other updates? Or if you're going to do another step, would you please type what that is in the chat?
We'll give everyone a few more seconds to enter their results. All right, we'll end the poll and share the results.
Thank you, Allison. So it looks like we're in various stages of policy development process, including identifying policies, but mainly updating and revising and educating and re-educating staff on those policies you already have in place. And that's great news. We hope that you're excited and ready to start strategizing and working through policy development. Please let us know what additional information may be needed to assist you in conducting your strategy and policy development. Please be sure to mark your calendar and use the link on this slide to register for July's office hours, which will occur on Thursday, July 13th at 2 p.m. We will be discussing policy enactment. We will also share additional policy templates that have been finalized since today's webinar. Allison will stop the recording now and we will open the session for Q&A. As a reminder, you can enter your questions by using the Q&A or chat icon at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to ask your question verbally, click raise your hand using the reactions icon and we will unmute you. Are there any questions from today's webinar participants?